Last Thursday afternoon, Nancy Chateau, the District 9 qualifier for the International Speech Contest at the Toastmasters International Convention in Vancouver, BC, competed in semifinal round 7. Lloyd Smith watched the live streaming of her contest, and this evening he will be doing an educational presentation about how what he saw can be applied to our own speaking here in the club, and in the world beyond. Lloyd Smith and the listening to the wannabe champions.
Speech contests are a niche activity in Toastmasters. Lots of people are fond of reminding those of us who enjoy doing them of that. But you have to remember that niche is occupied by 35,000 people worldwide who start the international speech contest at the club level and work their way up. By the time of the conference in Vancouver, it was the top 110 people, the winners from each of the 110 districts around the world. Nancy spoke. She didn't win, but she did a really nice job, probably better than any of her practice videos looked that I saw. I was watching because another Toastmaster from Yakima, Mike Anthony, and I were Nancy's coaches for this, and we were pleased with how she did. When I talked to her yesterday on the phone, she was pleased too, and so that's good enough whether she won or not. Nancy actually is in Toastmasters for the leadership track, not so much the speaking track, and she was way outside of her comfort level doing this kind of competition. I always like to watch the speech contests mostly for the fun of it, the same reason I do the contest, but also you can learn a lot from watching these people. I mean, some of these people are ready for Broadway quality speakers. I'd like to talk about 3 things that I noticed in Nancy's semifinal round that could have an impact on all of us as we speak, both in front of the club and also in real life, so to speak. The first one is big room speaking. We get used to speaking in front of a group like this in a room about this size, but it is quite different to speak in a larger room in front of a much larger number of people. I know at our district conferences, maybe a couple hundred people at the most is the biggest group I've ever seen at a district contest, but it's not that unusual to speak in front of larger groups, to do lectures and presentations and whatnot for community groups. You have to remember something important. A bigger group reacts much more slowly than does a smaller group. And I know when I've been doing the humorous speech contest, you can almost see the reaction roll through the crowd like a wave. The people at the front get it first, and then the people at the back. That means you have to do everything a little bit bigger and a little bit slower in order to make it work. You know, in a group like this, if you do a little quick gesture like that, everybody will see it, but they won't see it if they're sitting 75 or 100 feet away in the back of a bunch of tables. So you have to make it slower and bigger. You have to have your facial expressions bigger and last a little bit longer in order to make sure that everybody's going to see them. Pardon me. There were a couple of speakers on Thursday during Nancy's session who didn't seem to get that. It's probably nerves that made them speed up rather than slow down. And their presentation suffered for it. But the lesson is if you're in front of a bigger group, which I actually find much easier to do than speaking in front of a group like this. But if you're in front of a bigger group, you have to slow a little bit, make everything a little bit bigger and more pronounced than if you were not. The second thing is microphones. I don't know how many of you have ever used a microphone when you've been speaking, but there are a couple of things you have to remember about it. It's not as natural a thing as it may seem, but it's a handheld microphone. You have to hold it about like this, about like I'm doing, just a little bit below your mouth. Any kind of quality microphone will pick you up just fine. The problem is some people with handheld microphones begin to do gestures, and that's not a good thing to have happen. It's really, really difficult to get yourself to hold that thing still and gesture with one hand. At contests, typically the microphones are either lapel-type microphones or the kind that hook over the ear and have a little boom that comes down in front of your mouth. In Nancy's contest, it was the boom kind. There's a little framework goes over the back of the head and comes down, sticks down here. But notice where I'm holding my finger, that's about where the microphone is. I find that very distracting. I can actually see that little boom when I'm speaking, and you think it's like a bug or something floating around your mouth. In Nancy's case, though, when she walked out on stage, I thought there's a problem because whoever had adjusted the thing had it up about like this between her nose and her mouth.
Oh, no.
And sure enough, it picked up her breathing from her nose, not just her voice. Now, I don't think it harmed her presentation at all, but it was a somewhat of a distraction. She sounded breathy, maybe like she was having an asthma attack, a little one or something like that. So I don't know whether she adjusted it or somebody else, but you have to think about that. If you are a female, you have to think about the clothing you're wearing when you're using one of those wireless mics too, because there's a little box, the transmitter box with the antenna on it, that has to clip somewhere. And it's sort of funny to watch female contest speakers suddenly realize they don't know where to clip that box. There's nothing on their clothing. If that's the case when it happens to one of you, clip it on the back of your neck. It won't be visible while you're speaking. And that's really about the only choice you're going to have unless you hang on to that little box in your hand, and I don't recommend doing that. The little green light will be distracting if nothing else. The other thing, the third thing that I noticed was weirdness. You got to avoid weirdness during your speeches. Here again, in a small group, it doesn't matter much, especially if we all know one another. But when you're standing out in front of a group of strangers, it kind of does. Now, there was only one really weird, bad speech in Nancy's semifinal round, and that was by a guy from Gig Harbor, District 32. He brought out a yardstick and had it propped up on a chair, and that yardstick was his prop. Now, it symbolized his life in the sense of, like, he was saying that he had always done things so carefully and so measured and whatnot, and the yardstick was that. That worked fine. But then he decided to use the yardstick, I don't get this, but he decided to use it as a representation of his mother. And so he talked to the yardstick, and it was sitting on a chair. It was the most bizarre thing. And he didn't have good delivery. I think he was overwhelmed by the situation, probably. But you have to think a little bit. Is that a wise idea to represent a person with a yardstick? And common sense would say, no, don't do it. And he should not have done it. He would have been better off doing the Clint Eastwood thing at the Republican convention, just talk to an empty chair, although he probably didn't want to sound like a senile old barfly or something like Clint did. But anyway, it's really important to remember that. But the biggest thing is that when you're talking to a larger group, and there were 300 or 400 people in that group, you have to do things a little differently. That's true in a really large group too. Friday afternoon, the final round happened, and that was in a gigantic auditorium in front of 2,000 people. Now, that wasn't so much a problem for the speakers because there was a huge video screen on the wall above their heads so that people in the cheap seats in the back could see them, because it would have been impossible. A giant room. But it's an interesting circumstance. I'll conclude, by the way, with one of my standard things. Please think about entering the speech contest. They're actually a lot of fun. Sure, everybody's thinking, Mr.